Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Richard Kenneth Ollie, Howard Lloyd Allen, Ronald Stewart Allen III, Thomas Leslie Anderson, Rudolph Ernest Araujo, Richard Charles Backert, Stephen Eugene Backus, Charles Homer Ball, David Leon Barber, Luther Barney, Jack Evan Beam, Charles James Beebus, Don Whitney Belander, Rudolph John Billiot, Joel Ray Birch, William Webb Blair, Jr., Robert Jurdes Blank, Edward Leroy Brock, James Homer Brown, David Raymond Bruce, Frank Henry Buck, Charles Joseph Buckley, Daniel Scott Bacala, Roy Jeffrey Burke, James Lynn Burns, Robert Joseph Campbell, Joseph Philip Castagna, Timothy Eugene Clark, Roy Ellsworth Coggleton, Arthur Perry Copeland, George Simmons Costello, Randall James Craddock, Charles Edward Darr, Spotswood DeWitt, James Howard Dean, Ray B. DeBisque, Jr., Delma Ernest Dickens, Thomas Joseph Dowd, Robert Charles Druas, Mitchell Jerome Duncan, George Ray Durham, David Leroy Eggleston, Robert Thomas Elliott, Michael John Fegan, Charles Frederick Fenter, Bob Joe Ford, Jr., Thomas Lynn Forsythe, James Ray Fuller, Larry Allen Goff, Larry Eugene Gonzalez, Frank Alton Gould, Robert Stewart Graustein, Christopher James Gray, Robert Carl Green, Jr., Rockney Lamar Hardwick, Thomas Trammell Hart III, Keith Russell Hagen, Arthur Robert Herndon, Michael Thomas Hoke, Marvin Thomas Hughes, Robert Howard Ingram, Jimmy Ray Isbell, Richard Joseph Jansky, Edward Harvey Johnson,
Sylvester Johnson, Leroy Elton Jones, John H. Joyce, Barry Paul Coletta, Richard Allen Caskey, Carol Jean Keener, William Henry Kennedy, Bobby Alexander Kirby, Thomas Russell Kisner, Stanley Neal Kroboth, Harry Roy Lagerwall, Fred Donald Lambert, Robert Lionel Lyles, Jr., Richard Victor Lind, George Barry Lockhart, James Earl Lowry, Robert Ray Lynn, George Duncan MacDonald, Eugene Mandigo, Robert David Mason, Thomas Richard Maddy, Thomas Monroe Mays, Michael J. McDonald, Richard Hugh McCam, Edward Curtis McHenry, James Crabb McIntosh, James McMurray McLean, Glenn Leon McMaster, Adelbert Earl McCrae, Kenneth Bruce Mador, Paul Oswald Meader, Jose Mendel Mendoza, David W. Mild, Bruce Edward Miles, John Bigelow Moore, William Charles Moore, Jr., Wayne D. Morgan, William Vance Moss, Ronald Ernest Mullinex, William Donald Mullins, Robert Emmett Murphy Jr., David Ross Myers, Ronald William Nickerson, Thomas Eugene Novak, Robert Philip Nowicki, William Eugene O'Connor, Louis Olmos, Ernest Ortega, George Henry Passio, Les Howard Paschal, Donald Howard Powers, Rodney Terrence Pratt, Donnie Dwight Presley, Reuben Preto, Rolly Keith Reed, David Lynn Reck, William W. Richard, James Felix Rummage, Edward Solones Jr., Edward Joseph Scalise, Lee D. Scurlock Jr., Elmer Gerald Sikorsky, Glenn Harold Simmons, Gary Phillips Sinclair,
Larry Eugene Smedley, Murray Lawrence Smith, Gary Michael Smith, Donald Laverne Smith, Charles Finney Sorrow Jr., Alfred Lewis Fitzfadden, Bernard Edward St. Jean, Thomas Stephen Stafford, Melvin Sullivan, Stanley Edward Taylor, Earl William Thomas Jr., Lane Abraham Tilson, Jose Antonio Tingero, Norman George Tonis, Francis A. Trinchetella, Daniel Alexander Verdugo, David Alfred Vaccaro, Robert Lee Walls, Francis Anthony Walsh Jr., Donathan Keith Walters, Frederick Piers Webb, Leonard Webb Jr., James Francis Wendelowski, Robert George Wilkie,
John Quitman Winningham, Lawrence James Wissell, Richard Jean Wormdale, Robert Lee Worthington, Robert Allen Yates, Thaddeus M. Yonica Jr., Vicente Zuniga,